Okay, so good morning, everyone. Like João Pedro explained a little bit already, I will be focusing more on the dissertations and master theses that were done here at the University of Lisbon in the area of teacher education. And I'm going to share with you a little bit of the data we've been gathering from a project that we've launched maybe 1 year or 2 years ago. Maria João can help me because she was part of this project, and also Manuela Esteves and other colleagues in the group of teacher education, where we try to look at the scenario of teacher education dissertations and theses done at the University of Lisbon, both at the old Department of Education at the Faculty of Science and at the Faculty of Psychology and Science Education that we used to have before we merged and got the Institute of Education. So we'll be looking at studies that were done between 2000 and 2011. We actually have studies up to 2012, but that set was incomplete, so I excluded those. I'll share with you the scenario that we have from those studies in the area of teacher education. What are the emerging themes that come out of those about 220 studies that we have, and how they can be framed and discussed at the light of the key issues that we've identified in the key issue study that is also in your booklet. And then I'll finish up with some conclusions and a little bit of a few issues for discussion. And please time me. Okay. So first of all, it's not easy to be in graduate school. I found this wonderful cartoonist too late as a graduate student. I was finishing up in 2004, and I found this George Cham is great cartoons to relax when you are in graduate school. And we can see that this is no research, of course, but this is just something that he did with Google searches, and it shows us that most graduate students are more sad than happy, or at least there are more mentionings in Google with sad than happy, with working than sleeping. But there's reason to be optimistic. They're more optimistic than pessimistic. So it's an interesting bunch we're looking at here, both master students and PhD students. From this about 200 and something studies that we had, as we look at them throughout these last 11 years, from 2000 to 2011, actually 12 years, we see that there was a surge in finishing up in 2006. I'm not sure. I think they were dragging their feet, and when Bologna came, a lot of them rushed to finish up before Bologna, so that's why I think there's that surge over there in 2005 and 2006. Then we come back for a more steady level, about 17, 16 in teacher education, and then we start going up again in 2011, and from 2012 we have a similar trend. So a lot of studies have been done here at the University of Lisbon only in the area of teacher education, both masters and PhD. Most of them are master's degrees. I did not translate this one. I apologize. But master's is mestrado, so 194 of those studies are master's studies, and only 27 are PhD studies in the area of teacher education. When we look at the focus of the study in terms of, we did not, when we did the methodology, we did not do the 3 I's. We forgot maybe we don't focus enough on the induction I here, but we considered only in-service and in-service or other that looked at other situations. Maybe there are some induction over there in the other that were categorized there, or the other also reports some studies that are done in the setting of higher education, looking at how higher education professors learn. But we see it's about even between pre-service and in-service, and maybe there are also some induction studies in the in-service section. When we look at the target population, and we did this by the cycles of studying here in Portugal, we have the kindergarten or pre-kindergarten, where we have a small amount of studies, and we have the first cycle, which is teachers working between 1st and 4th grades. Then we have the second cycle, between 5th and 6th grades only, and then the third cycle, then high school between 10th and 12th grade. And we see there, it's about even. There are more studies with first cycle teachers. Then there are some studies in higher education. There are some studies in teacher training. Maybe I should have put teacher education in general. And there are some that we categorize just as training that can be in other training contexts. When we look at the research paradigm in these 200 and something studies, there's a very uneven balance here. We see that a large majority, almost all of them, go for a phenomenological approach. And only 17 of those studies, so not even 10%, take a positivistic approach. And there was one brave graduate student that took a sociocritic approach. When we look at the research goal, it's also uneven. There's a large majority going for descriptive studies. There's a large number also, almost 79, for exploratory studies, and only 2 brave graduate students took explicative studies. When we look at the research time frame, we also see, but this happens a lot in education, we don't have enough longitudinal studies. We only had 10 out of those 207. Some studies are not categorized. The numbers will not always add up to 228 because some studies we had difficult categorizing. This is an ongoing project, so we're still looking at them. But only 10 of those studies were categorized as longitudinal studies, so looking across several years, which is something we recognize it's very hard to do. When you have a master's, is also almost impossible, but a PhD is still, because you only have a certain amount of time to do your work. You don't want to stay in graduate school forever. When we look at the methodology, we had some troubles here classifying, but again, it's very uneven. We see that most studies have been categorized as case studies. 76, and then there are a few categorized as action research and almost nothing in the other areas. But we still have to look more into this categorization. When we look at the data collection methods, we can see that there's a lot of people doing interviews. There are some people doing questionnaires and document analysis, and the other data collection methods are not as much used as the other. There are 3 categories related to observation there, so we can add those up: naturalistic observation, systematic observation, and participant observation, to see how many actually did observation, and that comes up to 36. But we can see that it's not a very, very large number. When we look at the data analysis that's been done in these studies, most of them have, because of their more qualitative approach, have done content analysis, and this is okay. It's in the scenario that we are painting here. There are also some doing statistic work, but most of them only do descriptive statistics, and only about 10% of the studies actually go for inferential statistics approaches. So this is very uneven too. Okay, when I looked at the cloud keyword for the keywords describing these studies, I did this in Portuguese, then I threw away those that were very obvious, like formação or training and teachers, and I translated the main ones, and these are the main ones that come out from those 200 and something studies. We see development as a very important issue. We see practice, competencies, and then the other ones are not as often mentioned, but school. There are several studies looking into needs assessment, into supervision, into assessment in general, learning and knowledge, reflection, into autonomy, and then mathematics and science come up over there as the last ones, because there are lots of studies that have been done in the context of mathematics teaching or science teaching. Okay, so what are the emerging themes in the light of our key issues for these 200 and something studies? We have 4 emerging themes here: the competence profiles that the studies are trying to look into, the principles for teacher education, the curriculum challenges, and teacher professional development. When we look into the competence profiles, there are many studies that try to describe what are the competencies of a teacher. And these are the traditional ones that emerge. There are many other competence profiles in the literature. We can look at the Koster and other authors' work where they have 6 dimensions with almost 30 different competencies. Or we can look at Christine Danielson work where she looks into 6 dimensions of competence profiles. That's different because she actually suggests that teachers can develop those competence profiles as they go along, and they should start with only some of those competences during their induction years and then evolve. Here, we saw that most of them were mainly focused with content competences and communicative and reflective competences. There were not as many studies looking into organizational competencies, and there were several studies also looking into pedagogical competencies. When we look into the principles for teacher education, there are 3 areas that come up here and in the literature. The views of knowledge and learning that direct the practice of the teacher educators, where we have things like involving the teachers in continuously conflicting and competing demands, or requiring that the knowledge subject to be created as a subject, or a shift on the curriculum from the teacher to the learner. And we have also things more related to program structures and specific practices, where teaching is enhanced to research, for example, or we have those requiring an emphasis on learning in teams. And we also have one area where we don't have as many studies, where we have quality of staff and organization, where we could have things like teaching and learning as model. Russell, for example, advocates this a lot, that the way we teach is more important than what we teach in itself. And we don't have a lot of studies looking into that, even though that's one of the areas. Or the meaningful relationships between institutes of education, or universities and schools. We don't also have a lot of studies in this area, in this last area. Okay. And for the curriculum challenges, there are two levels here. There are some challenges that are more related to views, to competing views, I would say. One view where we have challenges more related to competing curriculums or practical knowledge curriculums, where there's this recognition of an accommodation to social demands. When we look at the competition curriculums, for example, we see that this is a very common view of curriculum development for teacher education, where shared by these studies. And there's this illustrates this need for a more holistic, more balanced view, more integrated view of curriculum development. The practical knowledge is also very present in our studies, and it illustrates this view of learning to be a teacher educator as school subject studies, or plenty of school contact, of many experiences in school contexts. And when we have this more reformed view, where we have the other three approaches to curriculum, where we have collaboration, research-based knowledge, and a break with tradition. I think this break with tradition is more aligned with the pedagogy of discomfort that Carrie was telling us about. But we don't have almost nothing looking at that view. We have some studies looking at the collaboration, like João Pedro just shared with us. Okay, I'm finishing then. And the research-based knowledge, okay? There are many studies looking into teacher professional development, looking into the principal factors impacting professional development, but this is not new. This is interesting. There are studies looking into the masters, at the transformation of the teacher educator from a master role, where the teacher educator comes as a master, towards more partnerships, where it tries to develop partnerships with the schools, between institutions and schools, between educators and teachers. And finally, for finishing up, without taking too much time, these 3 remarks for discussion. We're trying to move from a competence profile to how this competence profile can be used to improve teacher quality. We're never comfortable with the competence profile. We always want to improve. If we think we're finished, we probably have done some mistake. We see this move from Bologna to a more integrated curriculum. There was a reform in the curriculum for teacher education here in Portugal with the Bologna process, but we still need to go for a more integrated curriculum where practice and research are more interconnected. And then finally, from contextual obstacles to enablers. We still see a lot of contextual factors as big obstacles, and they could be enablers. For example, we see that in Portugal, there are many situations where teacher assessment or student assessment that grades teachers too can be a big obstacle for teacher education. I just saw great enablers from Norway. I wish we had them here. But we can also develop those enablers ourselves if we create those partnerships ourselves. Okay. Thank you very much.